who knows, really? It is a little strange that they happened upon this scene at the same time they encountered this weird cryptid.
It was 1995 or 1996. Ignacio Fernandez, a pseudonym, now an adult, recalled an experience that he had as a child living in Buenos Aires in Argentina. He was 5 years old when he saw a creature on the roof of his house. He observed it at night. It was massive, standing around, he guessed, 6.5 feet tall. To him it looked like a giant cat walking on 2 legs. Its fur appeared to be blue in color, and its eyes seemed to glow in the dark. They were not reflecting light, but rather they were giving off light. Ignacio noted that the creature appeared frightened. It was crouched low and ready to flee. As Ignacio walked closer, the creature suddenly noticed him. It stared directly at him, looking down from the roof. Ignacio then watched in disbelief as the creature made a move, jumping from his rooftop to a neighbor's rooftop. In a single powerful leap, it covered a significant distance. After that, it went out of sight. When asked to describe the creature in detail, Ignacio noted that its body was feline in structure, but clearly evolved for bipedal movement, with muscular hind legs and well-developed upper limbs. The sighting had a profound effect on Ignacio. Even 2 decades later, he found himself dwelling on what he saw as a child. Upon seeing James Cameron's film Avatar in 2009, Ignacio admitted that he was somewhat stunned by how similar in color the creature he saw was to the computer-generated skin color of the Na'vi in that film. He was certain that what he saw was a real creature and not a human in a costume. This was confirmed by how far it was able to jump. No man, not even a trained athlete, could make the leap that this creature did. Upright walking cat-like creatures, or cat people. I know that I've covered several of them over the years. They aren't nearly as prevalent as, say, Bigfoot or Dogman sightings, but they exist. In this particular case, the witness stated that he got the sense that the creature was frightened by something, and in a state of desperation, readying itself to flee. What exactly would it be frightened of? Another animal? Being caught? I suspect that something else might have been happening. Allow me to put on my fringe hat for a moment. Sightings of these creatures are few and far between. Is it some flesh and blood animal yet to be identified, hiding out undetected for eons? Or had it been placed there by somebody? Or by something? It seems this would explain the creature's seeming fear and anxiousness. If somebody plucked you out of your reality and placed you into another, you might react the same way.
The fact that this creature had blue fur is interesting. I don't think I've ever read a report involving one of these upright walking cat creatures or felines before. I know I've read of a blue Bigfoot sighting, but I've never heard of a blue Catman sighting. So that's a first for me.
It was 1960 or 1961. The witness, Ruth Summersides, then around 11 years old, was living with her family near Acombe, a village in the south of Northumberland in England. At that time in her life, she was greatly interested in painting and art. One sunny July day, after her parents had left to run some errands, Ruth decided to set up her easel outside on the grass and do some painting. She had barely started working when something caught her attention. I heard a kind of whistling and whooshing sound behind me. Turning, I saw something flying towards me. I remember thinking that someone had fired an arrow at me. I threw myself to the ground, and whatever it was passed over my head. When I stood up, I saw that the arrow had flown across the yard and stuck nose first into the front door. Needless to say, Ruth was stunned. I went to investigate, and when I got to within a couple of feet, the arrow settled vertically beside the door knocker, which had approximated in length 6 inches 15 centimeters. The thing had a black pointed head with a frilly ruff around the short neck part. The body was black and very shiny, about as thick as my index finger. Hanging from the neck were about 6 very shiny red ribbon streamers, about half an inch, 12 millimeters, wide at the end and tapering towards the neck to about a quarter inch or 6 millimeters. They were similar black streamers underneath. As Ruth examined it, something strange began to play out right in front of her eyes. To my extreme fright, the thing then moved and started whirling and spinning, making a whistling sound. She immediately began to run, even jumping a 4-foot dry stone wall with ease. The object whistled behind her, following her around the back of the house. I went inside, locked the door, and dragged a heavy dresser across the doorway. I hid in the pantry until my parents came home. Upon arriving back at the house, Ruth attempted to tell them what had happened, that she had been attacked by some kind of miniature flying entity, but they weren't buying it. Of course they laughed at me and said I had seen a dragonfly or a hornet. They just didn't listen, so I stopped talking about it. Sometime later, Ruth had done a delivery run, bringing eggs to an older fellow in the village, and they got talking. She told him of her bizarre encounter. I told him what I had seen, and he said, "I haven't seen one of those things for over 50 years. They're called flying arrows." I don't know whether or not he was just humoring me. I have looked in many insect books, and I have never seen this thing described or portrayed, and it has bothered me ever since. Ruth eventually moved to Canada, settling in Saskatchewan. In 2007, she wrote to the Fortean Times magazine with her bizarre story, even including a drawing of the entity that she saw.
I've read of reports of extraterrestrials that were very, very small, like 10-inch tall extraterrestrials. I know I've collected about 4 mini Mothman type reports where these like 10-inch, 12-inch tall Mothman-like creatures were observed. But I don't think I've ever heard of anything like this. And she doesn't even describe seeing a body. She describes a black arrow-shaped head with these kind of red and black streamers, coming off of it with this, ruffled thing on the neckline where the neck would be. And it was moving around. It seemed to be some type of a creature, a very small creature. But, I've never once heard of anything like this. A flying arrowhead. Now, if it was a current story, I would think, it's possible that it might have been some type of a drone, but I don't know. I don't think they had drones, not that small back then. And if they did, who's going to be using that on a little girl? It just seems a little strange. I don't know. It's very strange. What was it trying to do? Was it trying to harm her? It definitely sounds like it was.
It was 2014 spring. The witness, then 15, was at a friend's house, which was about an hour north of Indianapolis. They frequently hung out on the farm with their pellet guns. This time they were joined by the friend's brother. There was a patch of woods about the size of 2 football fields a little over a mile away, completely surrounded by empty cornfields with no access points from the nearby road. The 3 of us decided to walk out there because, why not? We were bored kids looking for fun. We put on some boots and headed out with our pellet guns. While the walk wasn't that far, the witness remembered that the spring rain from earlier in the week had made the empty field a big muddy mess. Every step, he recalled, your foot would disappear in the mud. As they trudged down into the woods, they suddenly caught sight of something that shocked them. Right as we walked through the bush surrounding the edge of the woods, we saw it. The best way I can describe this thing is that it was a raccoon that was built like a Great Dane. We had seen coyotes and wolves before, and this was not that. It 100% looked like the biggest raccoon we had ever seen. We could tell we caught it off guard because it was just standing there on all fours, grooming itself. And then it immediately locked eyes with us when one of us pointed at it and said, "Look at that thing!" There was a couple of seconds where we just looked at it as it looked back at us before it quickly turned around and scaled a 60-foot tree. We lost sight of it in the canopy. The friends looked at each other in complete disbelief. The way it climbed the tree was what freaked us out the most. It only took a few strides up the tree using its front paws to grab a spot on the tree to lift and launch itself up the tree. The arms were freakishly long and lanky when it climbed. It honestly looked somewhat human the way it articulated its arms as it climbed, like its elbows jetted out to the sides as it pulled itself up. The friends, while spooked, decided to look for it in the trees. Even though we were spooked, it was intriguing, and we wanted to see if there was any other freaky stuff around. There definitely was. The witness claims that as they looked around, they suddenly were confronted with something horrific. The woods were littered with easily over 100 animal carcasses, bone piles. Most of them were cows, raccoons, and opossums. There was one spot, maybe 25 by 25 feet, that had at least a dozen cow carcasses ranging from just the bone left to one that looked less than a week old. They were definitely being eaten by something with huge chunks of flesh being missing. I know cows get loose all the time, but damn if this didn't look like a feeding spot. They also found a man-made small pond near the middle of the woods, and it couldn't have been more than 6 feet wide. There was a shovel and plastic bucket sitting next to it. Once we found that, we were pretty freaked out again, and decided we better head back, because we had less than 2 hours of daylight left, and there was a lot of thick, deep mud to slowly walk through to get back. The witness claims that in the days after the incident, he had trouble understanding what he had observed that day. At the time, I was a major skeptic. I didn't fully process what we saw until years later. Looking for answers, he began to read about the paranormal and cryptozoology. He suspected that what they encountered that day might have been some type of skinwalker. My theory is this thing was stealing cows from local farms for food. There are a couple within 5 miles. Years later, he journeyed back to the spot and was surprised by what he saw. I don't hang out with those guys anymore. I tried to go back with some different friends somewhat recently, only to see that the woods had been cleared out. There was nothing there. I thought I was tripping out, but I looked on Google Earth and I could see in its place was dirt and log piles. Chapo melania is a giant relative of the raccoon that went extinct about 1.8 million years ago. They were said to inhabit South America and can get as big as 4 foot 9 inches in length. Cryptozoology is, of course, the study of animals that cannot be proven to exist. Those texts are often littered with reports of modern-day extinct animal sightings, people who are convinced that they encountered an animal that long ago died off. Is it possible that's what the boys encountered? This thing didn't look like a dog coyote at all. I just used Great Dane as a size comparison, as it was freakishly large to be looking like a raccoon. Yes, it had a striped tail like a raccoon. It had the face of a raccoon, specifically the large black spots around its eyes. Stubby, almost rounded ears like a raccoon. It had the bushy fur like a raccoon. We saw it very clearly with no obstructions from about 30 to 40 feet away. It was early spring. I'd be curious to know if there was any cult activity in the area around that time. Is it possible that some unscrupulous hunters were using that spot as a dump site? Or was the strange creature sighted by the boys responsible for the animal carcasses? Maybe it had nothing to do with what they found. Was the raccoon some kind of apex predator? Was it a skinwalker? Was it the phantom of a long-extinct animal? Or was it something else entirely? Possibly a drop-in from another reality.
One of the things about cryptozoology is, there are these reports involving giant animals, giant spiders, giant beavers, giant turtles. You will find these reports in these cryptid magazines or cryptid newsletters, and so they're not. I guess they're not. This isn't outside the norm. I don't recall ever hearing of a giant raccoon before. I've heard of an upright walking raccoon, the Carrie Mullis case.